We're going to begin the hour with breaking news overnight. The Israeli military has begun ordering civilians in the southern Gaza city of Rafah to evacuate and to move to what Israel calls an expanded humanitarian zone. Israel has repeatedly said it will launch an attack on the city, where more than 1 million civilians are currently sheltering, despite escalating warnings from its closest allies, including the United States, not to enter Rafah. This is new video into us this morning, obtained by Reuters news agency. Some Palestinians have begun to leave eastern parts of Rafah. The Israeli military says it's using text messages, airdrop flyers, and social media to alert roughly 100,000 people to move. Israel has not provided a reason for the evacuations and has not offered any timeline. The Israeli military calls it a limited scope operation, not a wide-scale evacuation. International aid agencies are again warning any attack on Rafah would lead to humanitarian catastrophe.
There's at least 1 million, perhaps 1.4 million people in Rafah, almost half of whom are children. And any kind of operation here would have catastrophic circumstances for them. And our concern is, as these 100,000 people, if they choose to evacuate to the west, that it would create panic with the rest of the population, and you'd see mass movement of people to areas that are just not prepared to receive them.
The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, as it's called, said earlier this morning its team will not evacuate from Rafah. It says it will maintain a presence as long as possible and will continue to provide life-saving aid to Palestinians. Sarah Coates is in Tel Aviv today with more on the operation and the impact it's having on civilians in Rafah.
Well, Hamas is calling this a dangerous escalation that will have consequences. Now, it's been a very active 24 hours on the ground, a number of overnight strikes on Rafah, Israeli strikes killing at least 19 Palestinians in the coastal enclave. Now, this came after another attack late yesterday, which Hamas is claiming it emanated from Rafah, a number of rockets hitting the Kerem Shalom crossing area, killing 4 soldiers and wounding some 10 other people. Now, it now appears as though this long-feared military operation down into Rafah is set to go ahead. The IDF, as you said, has been dropping these flyers on the eastern part of Rafah, telling people to get out and to move to these humanitarian zones. Now, they are Al-Mawasi, which is on the Mediterranean Sea, down in the south, and also to move to Khan Yunis, which is a little bit further north. But according to reports coming in from the ground, these people are absolutely desperate. There's chaos on the ground, and they believe there is absolutely nowhere safe to go. Now, we are hearing in Hebrew media that the Israeli Security Cabinet did actually approve these Rafah plans overnight, with reports also that the United States was briefed last week on these plans for the Israeli military to go in. So the next few hours certainly will be crucial as these people begin to pack their things and leave. But as I did mention, they say there is nowhere safe for them to go, Heather.
Sarah, Israel's prime minister said last week Israel would go ahead and launch an attack on Rafah with or without a new ceasefire agreement with Hamas. It looks like those latest talks have stalled, and there had been, when we were talking last week, there had been some optimism. The two sides were coming closer to an agreement. So what is behind this latest setback?
Well, Heather, both sides are now trading blame for the breakdown in these talks. We've heard from Israel's Foreign Minister, Israel Katz. He came out to say that Israel agreed to significant concessions, but Hamas refused them. Now, we've also heard from Hamas's Politburo chief, Ismail Haniyeh. He's come out to say that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, that he was the one that sabotaged these talks. Now, this is being denied by the Prime Minister's office. It issued a statement saying that this claim is a complete lie and deliberate deception of the public. Now, there are reports that the CIA director, Bill Burns, who is right now in Qatar with talks with the Prime Minister there, that he may be here in Israel a little later today, meeting with the Prime Minister Netanyahu in Jerusalem to really try and salvage what could be left of these hostage and ceasefire talks. But certainly a lot of pressure on Netanyahu with rallies right around Israel, people calling on the Prime Minister to do any deal, do it now with Hamas and bring the remaining hostages home. Heather.
Sarah Coates from Tel Aviv. Now, let's look here at the image, the skyline of Rafah. And let me bring you some reaction that literally has come in the last few minutes. Hamas has just said in a statement, any operation in Rafah will not be a, quote, picnic for Israeli forces. We've heard from France restating opposition to any Israeli offensive into Rafah. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has called for a ceasefire again. And the EU's top diplomat, Josep Borrell, he is demanding Israel refrain from any planned incursion. Here's what he had said just a few moments ago. Israel's evacuation orders to civilians in Rafah portend the worst. More war and famine. It is unacceptable. He too called for an immediate ceasefire and the release of all hostages being held by Hamas. We'll bring you further reaction, of course, as we look for signs there on the skyline of the ongoing airstrikes. Any word of any sort of military offensive in Rafah, we will be bringing you all of that detail as soon as new information comes in.